Having a proper medical emergency plan is super important when traveling abroad or going to austere environments. Today's video is all about this plan. Hey guys, welcome to the High Ground. My name is Fabio, and today we're talking about medical emergency planning. Now, this type of planning obviously comes from the military and PSD world, but in today's video we will of course discuss a version that is suitable for private citizens that want to be prepared and do not have a Black Hawk on standby. I never worked in a PSD role, but I have specific training in this area, and just by being a firefighter and in my free times out in the mountains all the time, I have quite some experience in patching up people. On the note of practical experience, please do me and yourself a favor, get some practical training. When we had those training courses, we even had doctors, surgeons from the hospital participating in it, because operating in an austere environment is not the same as in a hospital, and you shouldn't only learn from a YouTube video how to set a decompression needle or how to do a tracheotomy. So that's not something that I will teach here, but you should really go out and get the necessary training for that. But I also think that there is a lot of value in having the theoretical foundation for this type of planning, and this is the topic of today's video. This planning is split in 3 topics with questions which we have to answer to be prepared for a medical emergency. I will talk you through all these questions, but you will also find them as a summary in the video description below so that you have a reminder or a short list of them. Now, the first block that we have to cover are general considerations about our group and our trip, with which we lay the foundation for all assessments afterwards. So the first question is, what are the pre-existing conditions and what is the health status of the group? Pre-existing conditions are anything that has a negative impact on the survivability of one of the members of the group. This can be stuff like allergies to foods or to insect stings. That can also be being overweight or old. And of course, that can be something that I deal a lot with, previous injuries, which will need to be taken care of with bringing additional drugs and stuff. The health status of the group is more the positive side. If people are in very good shape, have they recently been to the dentist? And if you're traveling abroad for a longer time, you should definitely go to the dentist before you leave. Do people have a domiciled doctor who really have all their files at hand and who might be able to even get called from abroad? So these are all considerations about the health status of people that you should make before leaving. An additional thing you can already consider there is if somebody from your group has medical training, but we will get to that also a little bit later during our checklist. The second thing that we have to consider is what is the nature of the area of operations of the place we are traveling to. Do we have to deal with infectious diseases? Do we have malaria there? Are there venomous animals? And all this stuff is good to know. Some very good sources for this are the homepage of the CDC. They have a country list where you can click on and they will show you what infectious diseases you might encounter there. There is also a similar list from the EDA, so from the Swiss Foreign Ministry for my European friends, and also the German Foreign Ministry has one as well. So check all those sources. They will also give you information about potential parasites, etc. It's really important to know those non-accident related health risks before you even start with the second and third part of your planning. And the third thing you need to consider in this general overview is what is the medical infrastructure in the area you're going to? Are there different tiers in terms of quality of hospitals? Is there a hospital where the ordinary people go, and then is there a hospital system where the more privileged people or foreigners go? Is there even any health system available, right? So the big overarching considerations, you should consider then and make yourself aware of them before you go to the other stages of planning. From this general overview on our group and our area of operations or our travel destination, we're going more into the nitty-gritty of the planning and look in very much detail on the country or the site we're going to. I call this assessing the specific risks of the destination. The first point you have to consider is if you have access to information, to local information from that country. Of course, there are information, as I said, on the homepage of the CDC, but it might not be as current and as up to date as if you would have information from a real local person. Generally, when it comes to this local contacts, if you really want to be sure, it's cool to have a lawyer that is locally there, to have a doctor that is reliable and locally there, and to have a handler or any person that has some street credibility there. So with these three guys, you should be pretty much good. But of course, you can go down or can go up if you need more people. The second thing we have to consider here is which emergency medical preparation we need in the group. This is also based on the country. If you're going downhill skiing in Switzerland and you will stay on the slopes, then you won't need anything at all, likely, but you can fully outsource just based on the infrastructure that you have in said country. If you're going overlanding to remote places in the northern Sahara, then it might be a good thing to bring IVs, a SAM splint, and somebody who can actually put in an IV. So this really depends on our previous assessment of the medical infrastructure, and it is a decision or a question you have to answer at this point. The third point that we have to discuss are vaccinations. They are now a somewhat political topic, but you should A, decide if you want to have vaccinations, but B, you should also be aware if the country you're going to requires vaccinations. And I'm not talking about COVID, but really some countries, for example, in Central Africa, require you to have a list of vaccinations before they even allow you to enter the country. The fourth thing that you have to consider is your travel pharmacy, which drugs and which medicine you want to actually bring. Now, this of course depends on the country that you're going to and the availability of drugs there. If you want to dive a little bit deeper in this topic, a lot of militaries or state departments or something like that will have lists for their employees which show a certain list of drugs that they recommend to bring with them if they go to austere environment. I myself, I have the one from Switzerland. I'm not sharing this one because it contains somewhat medical advice and I don't want to do that. And also the drugs have specific names on the Swiss market and I don't know how to really translate them for the US market or for other European countries. But those lists are out there. Just look for them and I find them to be very, very helpful. In Switzerland, you have a system where you can actually talk to your doctor and tell him, hey, I don't need a certain drug right now, but please can you give me a handout prescription? And if I don't need this drug during my travel, I will hand it back in. So you will then have to actually sign for it, especially for stuff like morphines and stuff. Make yourself aware if this is available in your country and if your doctor would be willing to give you such a prescription. Connected to this is the fifth thing, the limitations on drugs and medical equipment you are even allowed to bring with you as a not accredited professional in that country. That can be limitations only on drugs, but it can go down to decompression needles, syringes, etc. So make yourself aware of what the regulations in the country are before you travel there with your med kit, and then you will lose half of it at customs or at immigration. The sixth thing is a more administrative thing, but you should be really aware of it. It's insurances. So we all heard talk about no-go areas. This is something that originally came from insurances, which said, yeah, if you're going to this area, you will not be covered under your insurance. So make sure that you really look into the details of your insurance contract, talk to the insurances, and this is true for health insurance, medical insurance, repatriation insurance if you have something like that, but also for insurances against theft and other stuff. So keep in mind that the coverage of your insurance might be limited if you travel to certain countries. And the seventh thing in this area is the question, which preventive action can you take to avoid medical emergencies? And I'm not talking about driving careful in the traffic. I'm talking about bringing high boots if you have venomous snake. Do you need any SOPs in place when you are in an area that has not good water quality, right? Stuff like that. So really, which preventive action can you take based on all the things you already know about that country? Now, with these 7 questions, you should have your bases covered. And in the third and last block, we're now talking about something I already touched on, the outsourcing of your medical emergency plan. That means we're talking about on-location support through the domestic system in that country. The first question there is obviously, what emergency medical assistance is available there? Is there SAR? Do they have helicopters? How close is the next hospital to the area that you will be in? I mean, it's possible that, I don't know, in Brazil you might have, or in Australia, in Melbourne, you have a very good coverage for your medical assistance. But if you're out in the bush and driving a long trail or something like that, the next hospital might be hours away, right? So make sure that you have a real good assessment how the local infrastructure can help you by you outsourcing your medical emergency care to them. The second thing you have to answer is there any supplemental medical care available there? So it's not only the emergency care, but is there a burn unit next to or in the vicinity to the area that you're operating in? If you intend to go climb mountains, is there any hospital that can treat high altitude injuries, not only like frostbite, but really like altitude sickness? So stuff like this, is it available? Is there non-emergency coverage by, for example, doctors that you find in smaller villages? And so this covers everything outside the ICU that you want to immediately have next to you, right? So these specialized additional facilities, what do you have there? What do you need to bring? Based on this, what is available or not? The third thing you have to consider is, how will you handle in-country transfer of the patient? How will you handle emergency evacuation? And how will you handle return to the home country after the emergency is over? Let's start with the in-country transport. This is basically what I already mentioned, the transport to a higher level of care, right? Knowing stuff like, yeah, you have to give the ambulances a certain amount of cash, but also maybe you can already buy into a specific system, and then the ambulance that will pick you up will have a higher quality and will directly take you to a hospital of higher quality. So stuff like that. Emergency evacuation is evacuation before you actually go to a hospital in country. That would be, for example, a case if you're a member of Rega. Rega is a Swiss, um, yeah, a Swiss club that basically gets Swiss people back from abroad, and they have fully medically equipped airplanes. So if I'm, for example, in a third world country and I have a medical problem that needs me to return home, um, but that is not immediately life-threatening, then I would think about calling the Riga and driving to an airport on my own and jumping into the fully equipped plane, over going into a on-site hospital and getting myself infected with various things that they might have there, right? And the third thing is returning home after the emergency. So this is not only, but a part of it, that some hospitals abroad like to keep tourists there because they can charge a lot of money for their services. But it's also things like, we actually had an example in our, well, in our circle of friends. The father of a friend had an accident in Italy, and Italy does not have the option that you don't want to have life prolonging measurements. So they will hook you up to that heart pump, and they will hook you up to the breather, right? And then you stay there even if you're almost brain dead. And the father of the friend never wanted that. And in Switzerland, you can say, hey, I don't want to have life prolonging measures in place when something happens. I just want to die naturally, and that's it. And it was really hard to get this person from Italy back to Switzerland, because they were not willing to put him into an ambulance um, in his um, in his state, because there was the likelihood that he might have died on the way back, right? And this is something that you have to consider, right? How can you get back into your country, not only to have further treatment, but also if you're in really in a pinch like that? Now, those were already the three blocks: the general considerations, the country-specific threats, and then the country-specific support that you can get there. Stuff and questions were overlapping, and that's intended, if you really go through the questions, so that you really have everything covered. Now, I hope that you found this video helpful. As said, you will find the list with the questions in the description below. If you liked it, please give us a thumbs up. If you have questions, please put them in the comments. I'm also interested in how you plan for your travels. And thank you very much. I really appreciate your time watching this video, and I'll see you next time.